This episode goes out to Alex. Ground and pound, brother. Ground and pound. Hi there, Garrett Robinson here. Welcome to the 14th episode of the Nightblade Epic Podcast Season 3. Hey listener, just wanted to drop a reminder that the next book of Underrealm is up for pre-order on Amazon. It's called Hellskin, and it's the third book in my Tales of the Wanderer series. It comes out on November 27th. This series has been one of my favorite things I've ever written. It's about battle and beer, blood family lost and true family found and chosen. And in Hellskin, the first trilogy ends with a bang. You're going to learn things about Underrealm I've been building towards for years. You can pre-order Hellskin on Amazon now. Pre-orders are a huge help, so it would mean the world to me if you'd order your copy today. Also, hey, guess what? We still have Underrealm books in stock for the holidays. If they're part of your holiday plans, as a gift for you or for someone else, you should order yours today. Now is the perfect time to go to underrealm.net/books and order the Underrealm full hardcover collection. It's 10 awesome books in 4 awesome volumes for one awesome price. Again, that's at underrealm.net/books. Okay, now it's time for today's episode. Today, you're getting Chapter 20 of Darkfire. When we left off, Lauren and her friends had barely managed to stave off a harpy attack as they were being herded through the Great Rock Mountains. Enjoy! Darkfire, Chapter 20. The next day dawned with little to lift their spirits, other than that the rain had finally ceased. But the sky was still gray with clouds, and it was hardly possible to tell that the sun had risen. They ate and made ready without speaking, and set forth upon the road in a foul mood. The harpies never ceased their swooping, and Albern stopped once at midday to look back. Half glimpsed in the mist far back along the pass, where it snaked around the mountains and back into view, several shapes skulked among the rocks, poking their heads out every so often to peer at the travelers. "The satyrs have followed us," said Albern. "I thought they might. At least they seem to have no interest in making a fight of it." "Not yet, at any rate," said Jordell. "If they planned to attack, there would not be a better time than now," said Albern. "For soon the road will descend to the valley floor again, and there a fight would not be so perilous for us." He said it as if it were a hopeful thing, but Lauren saw a darkness in Jordell's eyes that she thought she understood. The satyrs did not wish to fight them, for they were being herded. "Is there another way to the peaks that we might take?" said Jordell. "Another path leading up?" Albern looked at him in surprise. "One or two, but the harpies have not abandoned us." "Perhaps we can push past them," said Jordell. "Less and less do I wish to see this mountain fortress, for my heart grows heavier the more I wonder what might lie in wait for us there." "It would be wiser to turn aside once we have reached the valley floor," said Albern, "for then the harpies will have less of an advantage, and besides, we might find trees or rocks in which to take cover." "The moment we can, then," said Jordell. "And I do not care how much longer it will take us." That, more than anything else, filled Lauren's heart with fear, and she tried to stop her hands from shaking. The road dove soon, just as Albern had said, and before long their horses' hooves sank into soft, wet dirt rather than scrabbling on rock. Albern turned them aside at once, and they spurred their horses to a gallop, making for a small wood 100 paces from the road. The harpies screeched and dove, but the travelers only pressed their horses harder, Jordell drawing his sword in case of an attack. They had nearly reached the wood when they heard a great braying cry before them, and satyrs swarmed from the trees. The goatmen loosed many arrows that struck the ground around the company, making the horses rear. "An ambush!" cried Albern. Turn back." "No," cried Jordell. "They are few." And with a shout he spurred his charger. The satyrs saw death on his face and scattered, dropping their bows to flee. But the almost forgotten harpies swept from the sky. Their wings buffeted the riders, and Annis screamed as she was cast from the saddle. The plow horse reared, and for a terrifying moment Lauren thought its hooves would come down upon Annis, crushing her. But the horse turned at the last second to come down on the grass beside her head. Somehow Jem kept his seat until another harpy screamed by. Its great talons grazed his arm, and he cried out from the pain as he too toppled from the saddle. Too late, Lauren knocked an arrow and fired, but the harpy flew off, unharmed. Lauren rode Midnight up to the plow horse, trying to seize the reins, but the beast was terrified and bolted away from her, whinnying loudly. Albern wheeled his bay and gave chase. He snatched the horse's reins and led it back to the others. But just then, more satyrs came clattering down from the mountain pass above, storming across the empty ground. From his place in the trees, Jordell looked back and saw them, and returned with his charger to lend aid. He rode at the satyrs with a vengeance, but they formed a wall of spears and drawn arrows, forcing him to turn aside. "Jordell!" cried Lauren. But the beasts did not shoot at him, only forced him away. He returned to her side at the same time as Albern, and together the men studied the satyrs as Annis and Jem climbed hastily back atop the plow horse. "How many can you fell?" said Jordell. 10, if I do not miss with any of my arrows," said Albern. "Another 15 if I take Lauren's. But there are at least twice that many, Jordell, and though I can see you are a mighty warrior, I do not think even you can fight off more than a score of them." "We must return to the road," said Lauren. "Look at Jem." The boy cradled his arm against his side, and Lauren could see a deep gash stretching from shoulder to elbow. He gritted his teeth in solemn courage, but his skin had gone white, and his eyes were wide and fearful. "We do not know where the road leads," said Jordell. "But we know what will happen if we stay." Lauren's voice became pleading. "Certain death, with no chance for survival. Come, Jordell. The road may be perilous, but it cannot be worse than dying here." "You do not know that," said Jordell. But he turned his charger and led them on a wide circle around the satyrs, bringing them back to the road. Once more the harpies retreated, and the satyrs drew back into the rocks and brush, though Lauren could feel the weight of many eyes upon their backs. The moment they were safe again, Jordell called a halt so they could tend to Jem's arm. Albern had a packet of herbs in his saddlebags, and these he fashioned into a poultice with some water from one of their skins. He pressed the poultice into the cut, which was not as deep as Lauren had feared, though it was quite long. Jem winced as the pasty white-green mixture sank into his wound, but in a moment he sucked in a deep breath of air and exhaled. "I added some mint," said Albern. "It has little curative property, but the smell of it clears the mind." "It almost makes me forget I am hurt," said Jem, grinning. "Will the wound scar, do you think? I should greatly enjoy telling the story of how I vanquished harpies in the Great Rock Mountains." Albern gave a short bark of laughter, and then turned his head as he tried to compose himself. Jem looked at the bowyer suspiciously. "You have vanquished nothing more than bread and meat since we began this journey," said Lauren, her eyebrows raised. Jem lifted his chin. "The journey is not over. Mark my words, I will take a harpy's head before we return to civilized lands." Once Albern had finished with the wound, they rode on. The land grew more barren the farther north they went, trees and grass giving way to rocks and stones, with no signs of life anywhere, save the harpies and sometimes the half-seen satyrs. Though the road was wide and flat, and they all had an uncomfortable sense of being hunted, Jordell did not press them to move with much haste. "If we are being driven, I have no desire to move with speed," he said. "Mayhap if we move slowly, we shall force the hand of whoever is behind this, the Lord that Tiglath referred to." Whoever that is, I do not know that I wish to provoke them, said Albern. Yet I too have little wish to run headlong into their embrace. Had they not been harried so, Lauren might have found the mountains beautiful. Though most of the green had faded away, still there were many formations that nearly took her breath. Red stone showed on some cliff faces, struck through with threads of glittering white quartz. It gave them the look of marble walls, as though they rode through a cathedral that lay open to the sky. If only the roof were less gray and dreary, she thought. To further slow their progress, Jordell gave them a long rest at midday to eat. The harpies seemed content to continue their endless loops in the sky, while Jem gave them many dark glances and muttered to himself. Annis seemed determined to ignore everything around her, including her companions. She did not appear to regret a word of what she had said the previous night. Lauren wanted to speak with her, but she could hardly muster a scrap of attention while they were being hunted so. The day's end came at last, and not soon enough for Lauren. She longed to throw herself into slumber and forget about the dark creatures pursuing them. But first, Jordell called her over. I wish to go with Albern and gather wood for the fire, for I think we shall all enjoy one made from proper wood rather than dung, he said. Will you see to Zane for me? Lauren balked. I do not wish to go near him if I can help it. Do me this favor. I am well weary of this road, and I feel as though I might break if he looks at me even once more with his sullen fury. I feel the same. He has done as much harm to me as to you, mayhap more, said Lauren angrily. She looked down to see Zane lying nearby. Though she did not think he could hear them, still the wizard looked at her with that strange melancholy he had shown of late, as though he knew of what they were speaking. Jordell sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. Very well. Mayhap you were right. I shall see to him once I return, or mayhap I shall let him go hungry tonight. We have suffered enough trouble upon this trip on his account, and an empty belly might do him some good. Lauren pressed her lips together tightly. Oh, all right. I shall feed him then, if only so that he does not die on us as we sleep. But are you certain he is safe? I think he is too weak to try anything. And besides, you have your dagger. He cannot harm you. If he should attempt to speak, replace his gag immediately. You do not have to remove it very far, only enough to shove some bread and salted meat into his mouth. He can chew through the gag. He has earned that much discomfort at least. So saying, he strode off with Albern into the dimming light of the day. Lauren looked after them for a moment, and then she turned back down the road. The satyrs had remained out of sight, but she could feel them waiting there, watching, eyes peering into the light of the fire, and at the weary travelers gathered around it. She sighed and went to Zane. His eyes locked on to hers as she approached, and Lauren thought the sadness she saw there might overwhelm her. Never had she seen the wizard look thus since the day they had met, and it unnerved her. She reached into her cloak to finger the hilt of her dagger. I am safe, she reminded herself. He cannot harm me. I must only keep watching his eyes, in case they begin to glow. She tore a chunk of bread from the loaf in her pack, and held it ready, along with some meat, and prepared to remove the gag. She held herself tense, ready to mute him again if he should speak so much as a word. But the second she removed the cloth from his lips, Zane croaked, I am sorry. Lauren froze. Bread held a few fingers from his mouth. Of all the words she had thought he might say, those had not been among them. What? She said, for lack of anything better. I am sorry for what I did, for all I have done since we entered the mountains, for everything I did before that. I have done you much harm, and I cannot blame all of it upon the Magestones. He is playing a trick, cried a voice in her mind. He is trying to distract you. Yet he spoke no words of fire or thunder, and there was no glow in his eyes. In fact, Lauren doubted if he could summon much magic at all in his current state. His eyes were sunken into his head, the orbs bulging out from sockets emaciated and filled with wrinkles. Only a few desiccated patches of hair still clung to his scalp, and his wrists were raw from his bindings. "Those are pretty words," said Lauren. "Yet you will pardon me for wondering if you mean them." "I cannot blame you for that," said Zane with a sardonic little smile. "I have never given you reason to believe in me. Never. Not from the first day we met, when I abandoned you in the night. You placed your faith in me with a whole heart, something all the more remarkable from one who grew up as you did. I cast your trust aside, and that was a great evil. But much of this journey has been shrouded in darkness for me, and I hardly know my dreams from the waking world. I seem to remember that Jordell told you something of my story." "Something of it, yes, but not all." "Then you know I was hunted by more than just two simple constables," said Zane earnestly. I thought not to drag you into the darkness that my life had become. Yet no matter how earnestly I tried to avoid you, always you reappeared. To your great annoyance, to my salvation," said Zane. "I had only mad schemes to save my son. Had I tried to carry them out, I would surely be dead." "I'm not so sure. I've heard some say you are considered a mighty wizard, though you seem scarcely more than fair at it to me." He stared at her for a moment before he seemed to understand that she was joking, and then he gave a croaking chuckle. "I do not know how you can laugh now, but I am glad for it. I feel as though a great weight has passed from my spirit, and my mind is free from the darkness that cloaked it." His face grew solemn again. "I wish I could undo the evil I have done. I remember the faces of those I struck down on the road east of Wellmont. I can still see the dark fire as it consumed them. That memory will haunt me forever, I fear." Lauren's heart leaped, for she remembered what Jordell had said about the effects of the Magestone's passing. But then she stopped herself. This could all too easily be a trick. Zane had been dour and furious during this whole journey. He had tried to escape and had even cast flames upon them. None of it had worked. Now, mayhap, he sought to try trickery instead. Even before the Magestones, he had not sounded so hopeful as this. It was too great a change, too quickly. If he thought he could fool her, he would find himself mistaken. "Eat your food," she said tersely. "We have a long night ahead of us." She saw a flash of anger on his face again, the same he had worn each night as he lay by the fire. Though it dampened quickly, her heart skipped a beat. I was right, she thought. But Zane ate his bread and meat obediently, and did not protest when she tied the gag in his mouth again. His words troubled her long after she had retreated to the other side of the fire to stare into the darkness, long after Jordell and Albern returned and assigned the watches for the night. As the rest readied themselves for sleep, Lauren decided to speak with Jordell. When she told him what had happened, his mouth set in a grim line, and he nodded. "He said as much to me last night. In truth, that is why I wanted you to feed him. For one thing, I wished to see if he would say the same to another as he did to me." "And do you believe him?" said Lauren. "Do you think the Magestone sickness could have passed?" Jordell shrugged. "We cannot know for certain, not yet at any rate. For some the process is much longer, and for others much shorter. But none ever truly shed their desire. Always it will lurk in the back of his mind, goading him, prodding him. If ever Magestones are within his grasp, he will have to wage a great war against himself to resist them, if he even wants to. It is like ale and wine. Some people take to them ill and know it, and so avoid drink altogether. But some lose their wits and enjoy it, and they drink and drink until they have cast their lives down around themselves, one stone at a time, and then the only way to dull the pain of it is to keep drinking. yet the call of mage stones is even sweeter. So you think it is a trick? Lauren pressed. It could be, he nodded. Or it could not. Either way, we cannot risk trusting him yet. Not now, while we are pursued on land and in the air by dark creatures eager for our blood. Lauren nodded and retired to her bedroll. But she thought much about what Zane had said, and more importantly, the deep well of sadness she had seen in his light, gray-brown eyes. This has been a production of Legacy Books, written and narrated by Garrett Robinson. The music in this podcast was created by Will Musser. Check out his incredible work at willmusser.com. That's WILLMUSSER.com. Today's letter is O. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.